Hello, I'm Richard Vobes, the Bald Explorer, and I've been reading a book called Rambles Around Willow Farm, and I did a couple of videos on them and people have requested that I read a few more. So I'm not going to read all of the whole book because there's some chapters which it's originally written for children and sometimes they're just sort of not that interesting. But what's fascinating is, if you haven't seen them before, this book was written about 100 years ago and it's really about the farming practices of 100 years ago, and I'm fascinated by the old ways of doing things, especially now when you compare them to the incredibly intensive farming that we do today. So I'm going to read chapter 5 to you, which is called Sowing Barley. And it's fascinating how a farmer prepares the soil and then how they used to go about sowing seed. So bear in mind this was originally written for children, but it's actually quite detailed. February was a very wet month, as we thought it might be, and Mr. Hammond was able to do very little work in his fields. It was not good for the soil to be trampled on by men and horses when it was very wet. The soil cakes into hard lumps instead of forming a fine tilth. When soil is fine and crumbles easily, it's called a good tilth. Hard brick-like lumps formed when the soil is wet are difficult to break afterwards. It's better to wait for suitable weather than to be in too great haste. Now the dry, cold winds of March have been blowing for 2 or 3 days, men and horses are busy again. They're at work in home field, and we'll go out to look at them. The land is lying just as it was, left by the plough. I think you will see that the farmer could not sow seed yet on it. The sun and the wind have broken up the ridges that the plough made, but they are still rough and uneven. Here and there are great clods of earth as big as your head. There is hardly a piece of smooth level ground in the field on which seed could find a resting place. So the cultivator, or scuffler, is set to work. This is a machine that runs on wheels. On the underside of the frame are several curved iron teeth, or prongs, which tear or scuffle their way through the soil, breaking up the large clods. It's a very heavy machine which needs 4 horses to work it well. Turpin is here again, but not Captain. The other 3 horses are Norman, the young grey horse, and Bonnie and Smart, 2 brown mares. Norman is quite a colt and has only been at work for a few days, but already he has learnt to walk quietly by the side of Turpin, while Tom, William's younger brother, holds his head. Bonnie and Smart come behind, next to the machine. Smart is no longer smart to look at. She's quite old and rather thin and shabby looking, but she's a good worker. For my part, I prefer her to Bonnie. I know that Bonnie is very handsome, with pretty dappled marks all over her sleek sides, but she's also very bad-tempered. Don't try to pat her. She will only lay back her ears and snap at you, or perhaps strike out with her heels. Let's look at the ground again. Where the cultivator has passed, we see a great difference. The long ridges made by the plough are broken down to a smooth surface, and the large clods of earth have been split up. The whole field looks level, but it's not really ready for seed yet. The barley, which is to be sown, needs soil very well prepared for it, or it will only yield a poor crop. So after the cultivator comes the harrows. These are iron frames having straight teeth like long thick nails on the underside. The harrows have no wheels but drag heavily over the ground, breaking even small lumps of earth into smaller fragments. When their work is done, the surface of the field ought to be even, and the earth almost like powder. Mr. Hammond often uses cultivator and harrows more than once until he's quite satisfied. Sometimes too he rolls the field with a heavy iron roller. At last, towards the end of March or the beginning of April, the field is ready. And one morning we see the seed sown. This used to be done by hand. A man carried the seed in a bag slung round his neck. Walking to and fro across the field, he dipped his hand very steadily and regularly into the bag and flung the seed to the ground. This was called sowing broadcast, and a good sower did work very well. You'd be surprised to see how evenly young plants came up. Not too much seed sown here or too little there. Still, the seed was not sown quite so evenly as now it is by the drill. This is a large frame on 2 wheels and is drawn by 2 or 3 horses. Under the frame, near the ground, is a row of 12 or 14 coulters, something like what we saw on the plough. Behind each coulter is a little tube or funnel. The upper end of each of these funnels open into a long, narrow box on the top of the drill. The box is full of barley. When the drill moves forward, this is what happens. Each coulter draws a tiny furrow in the smooth, fine soil. At the same time, some cleverly made machine begins to work in the seed box. Little scoops gather up the barley and pour it into the top of each funnel. Down these it falls into the furrows made for it by the coulters. The drill is driven very steadily and straight across the field so that the seed is sown in straight lines. This was impossible when barley was sown broadcast, however careful the sower might be. Let's look at a handful of barley in the seed box of the drill. Barley is a very important crop. We've seen how particular the farmer is in preparing the field for it. He is also careful to see that he sows the very best seed. In the autumn, he will sell the crop of barley to be used for malting, a process in making beer. The better the barley, which the farmer can show in the autumn, the higher will be the price he gets. The grains of barley which we hold in our hand are all plump and well filled. The skin of each grain is wrinkled, and if we scratch a grain with our fingernail, we'll see that the skin is thin. Put your nose to the barley. There's no smell. This is a sample of thoroughly good barley, and as we have a very careful farmer and a well-prepared field, I think we may expect a good crop in the autumn. Behind the drill comes a harrow drawn by 2 horses, and this scuffles the soil lightly over the lines of seed so that none is left uncovered. And that's chapter 5. It's a fascinating account, isn't it, of the processes that people used to go for. When you think now it's a tractor that just runs backwards and forwards, several times the field has to be prepared. And I think this is something that we forget, how much effort goes into preparing the food and how much it used to go into preparing food in the more simpler ways. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this. I'll read some more if you're fascinated, probably just once a week, something like that. And I thank you very much for watching. Take care. Don't forget to follow, like and subscribe. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think if you'd like to hear more. And if you've got any thoughts on farming and the practices of before and of today. Thanks again for watching. Bye-bye for now. Bye-bye.